Hello, this is Rich Voltz, the Associate Director with the Illinois Association of School Administrators. And the purpose of this video is for those participants who have previously attended my training related to using the Danielson Frameworks to evaluate teachers. So this is going to be a quick review of some of the most important parts of that training, and I would like you to review this video prior to the time when your district has me coming into your school district to actually go with you as you go into classrooms to do informal and formal observations, and in some cases even go with you into the post-observation or reflective conferences as well. So what I'll be reviewing in this short video are my 6 steps for effective teacher evaluation. I'm going to again talk about how evaluators should score the observations. I'm going to talk about the post-observation meetings for both informal and formal observations, which sometimes we call reflective conversations, and specifically how to prepare effective reflective questions to ask during this reflection meeting. Okay, I want to remind all the participants that on my website I have several documents that you may want to use. So I'm going to refer to those documents right now. So if you go to my website, which is illinoisasa.wikispaces.com, you'll find that I have a variety of topics on the left-hand side. One of the topics is the Danielson workshop files. And I think you'd find this whole folder to contain some real interesting information that you might want to have. But the ones I'm going to be talking about in particular right now are some documents that I have developed concerning domains 2, classroom environment, and domain 3. And in these documents, I've made some quick looks for you to look at the various components within the documents. So to take a look at that, let's just get up document 3C here, and you can see I've listed about 40 strategies that teachers and or students would use that you might want to think about when you're going into a classroom to kind of help you visualize and concentrate when you're doing informal observations, and in this example, for example, doing an informal observation for 3C. So it's just a reminder that those documents exist and you may want to find those. In addition, on that same website, I have a video on there done with a principal from Deerfield that I think you'll find very helpful for you when you're doing informal observations concerning 3B, questions and discussions, with questioning and discussing in the classroom. So I'd highly recommend you watch this video also on your own. In addition, I have created 10 templates, 2A through 2E and 3A through 3E, for you to use when you're doing informal observations. And I will share these templates with you if you email me at rvoltz@iasaedu.org, and if you would communicate to me that you have seen this video, I will send you a link to the Google Docs so you'll be able to use these Google Docs when you're doing informal observations. So this is kind of what the Google Docs look like. They are specific strategies or critical attributes that Danielson points out in her work, and how you would use these documents when you're doing informal observations. Remember, I taught you should be concentrating on a specific domain and component when you're going in the classroom. For example, if you went in to see 3C, engaging students in learning, you'll find that I've listed all the 4, 3, 2, and 1 critical attributes, and then underneath these you would be entering in the evidence for what you see in the classroom when you mark if it's a 4, 3, 2, or 1. Now, going back to my scoring methodology, you might remember that we start, for example, in 3C under the critical attributes, the proficient column. And then after you've observed the behavior, you would say, did that behavior match what I saw? You'd stay in the proficient column. If it was more than you saw, you'd move to the distinguished column, and if it was less, you'd move to the needs improvement column. And you go to the next critical attribute and so forth until you finish this work. Now, what I'm finding when I'm actually going in with administrators to do the scoring, many administrators are using this process when they do the final summative evaluation. I highly recommend, even when you're doing your informal observation, let's say you were focusing on 3C like this slide is referring to, that you also would have the teacher highlight what they thought they were at and you highlight where you thought the teacher was at. This continually brings the teacher back to the language of the Danielson rubric. So for example, if I was in to see a teacher and I marked 1 4, 3 3s, and 1 2, those are just for discussion purposes, but obviously the teacher could see, heck, if I want to be at a 4 level, then I have to do these other things because it's going to be stated right in that document what Danielson meant by the critical attributes as she was doing this work. So again, the 6 steps that I taught you when we did these academies. Step 1 was concentrate on the correct domain and component. And the most important domain and component of Danielson is 3C, engaging students in learning. Hopefully you've been able to work with your joint committee so that the scoring of the rubric reflects the importance of this domain 3 in general and 3C specifically as being the most important component you can look at. The second step, and one that I'm finding a varying of degree in, is this idea of getting your teaching staff to buy in on the process. So I highly recommend that you involve teacher leaders on all the training and discussion that you have concerning teacher evaluation. And as a building level administrator, you need to make sure you you have ongoing training with your teachers on all the aspects of the Danielson Framework, so your teachers don't think that this is something mysterious, that your teachers would understand exactly what the Danielson Frameworks are expecting out of them. The third step in my process is to talk about change the focus. And change the focus has to do with observing through the student to the teacher. And I also recommend that sometimes that's all you would record when you're doing your observational notes is what are students learning. That's very, very important. What are students learning? Not necessarily what the teacher is doing or what students are doing. What are the students learning? So looking through the students to the teacher. The fourth step is to observe more. So this is just a graph illustrating maybe traditionally how it happened that an administrator would go in one time over 1 or 2 years, depending if it's a non-tenure, tenure teacher, and then make a judgment of the teacher's evaluation based on that one judgment. And obviously this is not enough, and that's exactly why administrators have had problems with teachers, and a buy-in to teacher evaluation is when we do the work like this. So it needs to be much more random and it needs to be much more time. So for a tenure teacher, we're talking about, I've asked you to look at 10 times in a 2-year cycle, 8 informal and 2 formal. Now what's really interesting about this, I have been into a number of schools this school year, and most of those schools being large schools and being urban schools. And in these large urban schools, I have seen some administrators who far exceed this 10 times per cycle. As a matter of fact, I observed one administrator who's been in classrooms, individual teacher classrooms, 20 to 30 times each. I mean, that is huge. But of course, I've also been with administrators who aren't doing observations very often, maybe 1 or 2 times. But it sure strikes me as interesting that some administrators can put enough worth on this idea of teacher observation that they can get in the classroom multiple times, sometimes dozens of times per school year, and other administrators seem not to be able to find the time but 1 or 2 times per school year. I will guarantee you will develop more trust and relationship with your teachers the more you observe the classroom and have the reflective conversations with the teachers. So the value of these multiple observations, the first one is to just congratulate the teachers on the good work they're doing. We have to be able to develop a relationship with our teachers and certainly tell them the good things they're doing is something that helps break that discussion out for when you're talking to the teacher. It also gets you as an administrator visibly out in the classrooms and out in the building. It tends itself to professional learning discussions between you and the teachers and even between teachers. It also, because you should be talking to the teachers after you doing the informal and formal observations, gives you a time to have the teacher do their self-reflection. Now, this is a big problem I am seeing as I'm working with administrators across the state, is oftentimes they're using the discussion period after the informal and formal observations to tell the teacher what they need to do to improve. You may remember in our training, it's more about the teacher reflecting on their own skills and abilities to be able to improve their teaching. So just like we want teachers to have students do more of the learning in the classroom, we as administrators need to have that same kind of philosophy and let teachers lead their own self-reflection and learning into becoming better teachers. Obviously, all these conversations you're having with teachers are going to be about teaching and learning and instruction, and those are all very powerful conversations to have with teachers and does make you an instructional leader in your building. And then, of course, this idea that we can coach and mentor people to become better teachers is really what the entire process of the evaluator is all about. Okay, I mentioned earlier the reflection, step 5 being the key. So after each observation, the administrator needs to reflect with the teacher. Now, oftentimes what I'm seeing is the administrator is collecting observational evidence and is sending that observational evidence to the teacher via text form, like in a Google form or in a Word document or an Excel document or some type of digital way. And then the teacher responds to the administrator in a digital way. And then the administrator is thinking, well, that's all I have to do for this process. I tell the teacher responds. And I think that is leaving a huge hole in the ability for the administrator and the teacher to develop a trustful relationship concerning the instructional processes that are happening in the classroom. I really think the administrator needs to meet face to face with the teacher and allow the teacher the time to reflect on their own thoughts and their own ability levels and their own research in order to be able to improve the work that they're doing in the classroom. Step 6 has to do with when to know the proper role. Hopefully most of the time we're coaching teachers. This is when the teacher wants to improve and you're just helping the teacher along in some of their reflective questions. We need to mentor new and beginning teachers or teachers who have a substantial change in their assignment, and sometimes that means we have to tell them, sometimes we have to coach them. And then for those teachers who are performing at the 2 or 1 level, then in those cases we need to tell, and it's our obligation to tell the teacher what they need to do in order to improve. So the real difference in the Danielson framework for teaching has to do with teacher-directed versus student-directed. So as you continue into this Danielson framework over the years, I believe we'll find more and more student-directed instruction, whereas traditionally what we found in education is more teacher-directed or teacher-centered work in the classroom. To be truly distinguished in the Danielson framework, then the student needs to lead their own learning. Now this does differentiate depending on your subject, your grade level, and the ability level of the students. So one thing an evaluator needs to do is share what it looks like by subject. For example, it's going to look different in kindergarten than it does 12th grade. It's going to look different in advanced placement math, calculus versus remedial algebra 1. It's going to look different in a special education classroom than it is in a regular ed classroom. So you need to make sure that you communicate with your teachers what it looks like in the proper venue that they teach in. Now, another thing I have been proposing for several years in this training is that the administrators ask these 3 professional learning questions to a sample of students every time you're observing. So I'm talking about a sample of students is maybe at least 3 students when you're going into a classroom, whether it's for informal or formal purposes. I am seeing maybe 25% of the administrators even ask any of these questions, and very seldom do I see any administrator ask 3 students all 3 of these questions. So the first question is, what are you learning today? So what are students learning today? And have the student have the ability to be able to tell you that back. The second question was, how will the teacher know that the student learned it? So that goes back to assessment. And does the student know what the teacher is going to demand of the student to determine the assessment for the learning goal that they have? And the third thing is, what is the teacher going to do if the student doesn't know it? And that's a really important variable. We can't just let students fail. So what's going to happen? Students have to know that there's going to be some additional instruction, there's going to be some consequences, there's going to be some reflection, there's going to be some remedial work, there's going to be something that happens if the student doesn't know the work. Now, many administrators talk about having time to conduct these multiple observations and reflective conversations, and I've talked about this a little earlier, but really you could have the time, as I've mentioned earlier, by some of these urban administrators I've worked with. So I'm saying make a goal maybe of 2 observations a day, whether that's informal or formal observation or a reflective conference, but have 2 times a day. Remember, those could be as little as 10 minutes each. Obviously, if it's a formal observation, it would be more than 10 minutes. But dedicate 30 to 60 minutes a day at a minimum to be doing this observation and reflective work with your teachers. If you cannot get 10 observations completed, remember I had a hierarchy that I gave you of informal observations that you would focus, and that starts with 3C, 3B, 3A, 3D, and then 2A through 2E. So the reflection, again, being very important for the administrator, and I talked about this earlier, but you really need to concentrate on reflecting face to face with the teachers that you're observing. And instead of telling the teacher what they should do, you might remember these stems that I shared with you. And the one that's really easy to use is the one, what strategies they've used in the past. Like, for example, in this case, if a teacher wasn't engaging students in questioning and discussion, that was part of your observational evidence, you'd ask the teacher, what strategies have you used in the past to engage students in the questioning and discussion? So you can tell by these questions, what I'm trying to do is get the teacher to reflect on their past strategies, their past success, their past knowledge. What have they done in order to improve whatever you saw in the classroom that maybe wasn't at a 4 level? And then remember, when you come out of this, there's some kind of an action plan. I mean, recently I was with a middle school principal who did a great job of this. I mean, she put down her observational notes. She had a reflective question for the teacher. The teacher answered the reflective question, and then the administrator even had another column, because she was doing this in a spreadsheet kind of a format for collecting the evidence, that she even followed back with the teacher to see in fact that they were doing what they talked about in the reflective action, which is exactly what we talked about in the work I did with you. So just to review some evaluation tips is I always use a seating chart with a key to the seating chart in order to make sure that the teacher is doing whatever I'm asking the teacher, or what I'm looking at for example, for engaging students in learning, for questioning and discussion, for assessment, for all of those things. And then remember, after you do this seating chart, you have to convert it to text in order to communicate to the teacher. If possible, hold all the meetings in the teacher's classroom. That's where all the teacher's work is, and that's also the least authoritarian place to have the meeting would be in the teacher's classroom. Remember to sit or stand or be in the classroom where you can see the eyes of the students, wherever that is and whatever configuration the teacher has for themselves. Have the teacher self-evaluate. Even after informal observations, have the teacher self-evaluate. Compare it to the way that you evaluated a teacher, and it's a great way of driving the language that you'll be doing in the reflective meeting. I believe this more and more. I can really tell the engagement of the students by how the classroom furniture is arranged. So remember to take notice of that. For any additional information, feel free to email me or call me and look for information on my blog site or on my website. And again, if you email me, I'll send you those documents related to the informal observations. So thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope it was helpful for you.